I'm fed up. Politicians have continued to say throughout most of my lifetime that they believe our best and brightest days are ahead of us. Anyone ever heard that? Successive prime ministers have said that, and we're still waiting. We've seen life in our country over the last 40 years objectively get worse. Too little has changed. And what a delight to be here at the Bruges Group. My own confession in the time of Norman Tebbit was as a young Conservative, attending Bruges Group fringe meetings at conference, suitably inspired and radicalised, such that I was then evicted from a foresaid Conservative Party conference under John Major for having the temerity to leaflet at the bottom of the escalators as everybody filed and into the conference halls against British membership of the ERM. So you have early radically radicalised and groomed this Conservative. And let me add my own tribute to Norman Tebbit, who in some ways is one of my predecessor, as somebody who both served initially as Secretary of State for Industry and then subsequently again as Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, and as part of a great coterie of distinguished politicians that worked under Margaret's leadership to successfully take back control of our country and deliver the sort of future that we want. Now, we're talking about the future, and let me start by nailing my colours firmly to the mast. I'm an optimist. I'm optimistic about the future of this country, and maybe in the context of what Richard and I have to look at across the benches every day, and the economic statistics that we see, and the radical leftism, socialism of this government. It's odd to have that optimism. I think you probably have to have a degree of optimism to work in the postcode that we do. But in politics, we hear less and less about optimism. And if we are to achieve what we wish to for our country, we have to project a positive vision. I'm fed up. Politicians have continued to say throughout most of my lifetime that they believe our best and brightest days are ahead of us. Anyone ever heard that? Successive prime ministers have said that, and we're still waiting. We've seen life in our country over the last 40 years objectively get worse. Too little has changed. We've had some successes, Brexit foremost amongst them. That's laid the groundwork, the opportunity for the sort of change that we need and want to see. And that was a prerequisite for us to be able to do the things that we want, to have a nation that can once again make its own laws, determine its own destiny. But for us to take that forward, as we heard from Tim and Roger, we need radical change. What we've been facing for most of my adult life, from the left, and sometimes even from within the ranks of my own party, has been nothing short of a leftist political and cultural revolution. So we, if we want our country to prosper, have to fight back just as strongly and just as decisively. And I genuinely believe that Britain can return to being a world leader in innovation, just as it was when it delivered the world the first industrial revolution. We can aspire once again that our families, our children and our grandchildren can be amongst the most wealthy on the planet, with tremendous purchasing power and some of the greatest life expectancies. None of that will happen without leadership, and none of that, to speak to my brief, will happen without the ferocious problem-solving power of business and private capital. Conservatives believe that things can get better, that decline is not inevitable, and that the individual and ideas matter. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why we are here today. In evolution, optimism is a selected for attribute because it encourages persistence, resilience, exploration, and yes, risk-taking. I spent 25 years in business. I saw optimism every day. It's the natural condition. Britain has huge strengths which even 4 depressing years of this government will not succeed in eradicating. The English language is the native language of artificial intelligence. The rule of law, deep and sophisticated liquid financial markets, and a pretty unique mix of the sort of businesses that the world wants and that are going to thrive globally. 4 of the world's top 10 universities: technology, AI, life sciences, space, advanced manufacturing, the creative industries, our cultural heritage, and financial and professional services. Realistically, we're not going to be building railroads with British steel, powered by British coal anytime soon. But we are building the future of countries around this world with our architects, our lawyers, our insurers, our financiers. I'm also optimistic, and again, as we heard from Roger, the problems that we face right now, and there are many, but they're entirely tractable. We're not the first country in the world to struggle with an ageing population. We're not the first, by any means, to struggle with a period of low economic growth. We're not alone in struggling to retain our best and brightest young people, or to have suffered a wave of low-skilled, culturally alien immigration. As was mentioned, our friends in Poland suffered decades of socialism, communism, and yet they're now set on a path to overtake us and a GDP per capita. Singapore was once in our lifetime synonymous with mosquitoes and mud and malaria, and now it is a world beacon for efficient government. And as we heard, Britain ourselves, after the failures, the consensus, the soggy middle of the 70s, restored pride and growth once again in the 80s and exported many of those successes to the world. So where the will is there, it can be done. Now, any change, and I did deliver change in business, starts from an honest diagnosis of where you start. We are no longer a rich country. We're no longer the country we think we are. Measured by GDP per capita, IMF statistics show that the UK has tumbled from being ranked around 9th in the world in the 1990s, that end of that era of Mrs. Thatcher, to today not even being in the top 20. The state consumes around 45 pence in every pound. In the US, it's about 35 pence. In Singapore, admittedly an outlier, it's 11. In comparison with other economies, the UK political class has loved to talk about the G7. Ever heard any politician compare themselves to the G7? That is just a way of concealing our past performance. It is dishonest, with the exception of the US, which is a very different model, very different type of economy, Silicon Valley, a country, an economy in itself. If you exclude the US, what is the G7? It's a club of complacency, other slow-growing, mature Western economies. We are essentially competing in the veterans race, and we're wondering why younger, fitter economies are coming up on the outside and overtaking us. For 37 years, the Institute for Management Development World Rankings has published an index of world competitiveness. The UK this year, I won't ask you, you'll all know this, the UK this year came 29th, just below Belgium, South Korea and Oman. Belgium! We've declined 11 places since 2021 alone. Ireland, which shares our geography, our language, our weather, was only 7th, much higher than us. So the next Conservative government I hope to be part of, will benchmark ourselves, our performance as a nation, against some of the world's most dynamic economies. Singapore, Australia, United Arab Emirates, India, Argentina, and Taiwan. That will be the peer group that we compare ourselves against. And free trade will once again be at the heart of that strategy for growth. Just think about it. We heard about the CPTPP, which is designed entirely to make politicians perform tongue twisters in front of audiences like this. But we've already, in our last period of government, I'm very critical of many of the things that we did and did not do. But our early, emergent, nascent strategy on international trade was spot on. We righted historic wrongs in respect of Australia and New Zealand. We forged new deals with Japan. We turned those into strategic alliances with AUKUS. We do have a frictionless trade deal in goods with the European Union. We still have that deep relationship with the United States. We've opened up new markets. And we have something that we've never made a proper opportunity of, which is the Commonwealth. A great opportunity, a market that naturally looks to us and our values and has 2 billion more people in it. We can't look back and look to Brussels. You can see it in this government. You can see it in their body language. They're itching to go back. The happiest a Labour minister looks like is when they're sitting down with their European compatriots. If Keir Starmer had a choice, he'd probably move his second home from Chequers to Chantilly. They're not patriots. They don't believe in our country. They're not optimistic about our future. We did make many mistakes in government, but Brexit was not one of them. Just today, just coming here this afternoon, we saw the EU's demand, their papers on the negotiation for us to go back into phytosanitary controls. And they want us to pay for the privilege. Labour have already in this government, in their first 12 months in office, passed something called the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill. It's a Trojan horse surrender bill designed to put us back into dynamic alignment. And of course, the government has decided after the folly of net zero that is damaging our economy and ruining our industry and driving up energy prices for consumers, they're going to double down and take us into the European trading scheme for emissions and add to boot an additional carbon border adjustment set by Brussels in Brussels. So we have to be honest about those opportunities, and we have to be honest too about what we did not achieve in 14 years. And Keir Starmer says it all the time, but I can understand as fellow Conservatives, people will look at what our own track record in government is. I wasn't in that government for most of it, but there's no question that from time to time and in some domains we strayed from our purpose. Too often, rather than confront head-on socialist agendas and socialist ideas, we appeased them or implemented slightly softer versions of the same. Too often we talked right and governed left. Instead of slashing the thicket of red tape, we became experts at farming it. We allowed international agreements and the courts to hamstring even the most basic functions of government, the pitfalls and traps left to us by that constitutional radical Tony Blair. Too often we appease the idea that socialists can and should solve all of society's ills. That government is the solution, not the problem. We had no part or no role and should never have contemplated banning cigarettes for adults or their choice of petrol-powered cars, no business regulating television adverts for yoghurt or porridge oats, and certainly no business raising taxes to the highest levels in most people's lifetime. But I want to be clear, that is in the past, and today the Conservative Party is under new leadership. As we develop the ideas, our ideas, your ideas, the ideas espoused by the Bruges Group, at an approach, certainly in business and trade, will be something that unashamedly champions wealth creators and risk takers. We're not going to rush into 1,000 detailed policies. We're going to take time to think and above all to listen. But unlike in the past, a future Conservative government will actively reverse the damage that this government is doing. We won't accept the leftwards inevitable ratchet of a socialist government followed by a replacement that merely holds stand, that maintains the status quo that we inherit. So some examples. People say we don't have policies. I'll give you some policies. We will repeal the family farm and family business death tax imposed by this government. We will repeal the tax on private education. And we will reverse something that Norman Tebbit would have felt very close to his heart. We will reverse the unemployment rights bill that is going through today in the House of Lords a 300-page, 120,000 word repeal of every regulation that we passed to tame the unions, a leftwards tilt that neither Tony Blair nor Gordon Brown saw fit to reopen the balance between workers' rights and the rights of employees and businesses to manage. We'll repeal all of the chapters in that bill. The lowering of thresholds for strikes, the lowering of thresholds to almost nothing, the right for unions to roam inside businesses, the swipe to strike, and all of the rights, all of the parts of that bill that impinge upon freedom of speech, the ability for employers and businesses. To sum up, we've got a lot of work to do to return our country to prosperity, growth, safety and sovereignty. We need to do some hard work, and we do unquestionably need to rebuild trust. We'll take a relentless and serious-minded approach. How do we make HMRC a partner, not a predator, to our businesses? How do we reimagine how we take risk in this country and whether the pervasive risk aversion is holding us back? How do we roll back the quangos, the arm's-length bodies? In this country, we now have more quangos and regulators than we have technology unicorns. We need fewer people in the public sector who see it as their purpose to say no. And instead of just one Department of Efficiency or one Doge, we need every minister in every department to be their own personal Javier Milei, their own chainsaw taking an axe to regulations and to waste. And as we heard from Roger, we need significant welfare reform. Our principles are unchanged, our policies we will formulate, and the difference next time will be behind those policies, our plans, and in many cases, the people to credibly put those into action the first day that we get back into government. Thank you.